Hello students. In this session, we will talk about the details of brachial plexus. The competencies which we have to cover are describe, identify and demonstrate formation, branches, relations, area of supply of the branches, course and relation of terminal branches of brachial plexus. Explain variations in the formation of brachial plexus. Explain anatomical basis of clinical features of Erb's paralysis and Klumpke's paralysis. Explain anatomical basis of injury to axillary nerve during intramuscular injections. We will cover these competencies under following learning objectives. By the end of this session, all of you must be able to describe and draw different parts of brachial plexus and discuss the course, relation, and termination of all the branches of brachial plexus. You must be able to define prefix and postfix brachial plexus. You must be able to define Erb's point, and you must be able to explain Erb's paralysis and Klumpke's paralysis under following headings: etiology, mechanism of injury, parts of the plexus involved, and signs and symptoms with which patient presents. Discuss the anatomical basis of Horner's syndrome, which is seen in Klumpke's paralysis, and describe the anatomical basis of axillary nerve injury during intramuscular injections in deltoid region. Students, all the nerves which enter into the upper limb play following roles. Either they provide sensory innervation to the skin and the deeper structures, or they provide motor innervation to the muscles, or they may provide sympathetic supply to the blood vessels and may act as vasomotor fibers, or they may provide secretomotor fibers to the glands present in the upper limb like sweat gland and sebaceous gland. So these fibers will be parasympathetic fibers. Out of 31 pair of spinal nerves which we have, the spinal nerves which emerge around the root of the limbs, that is upper limb and lower limb, they form plexus, like the spinal nerves, that is lower cervical and upper thoracic spinal nerve at the root of the upper limb forms brachial plexus. Likewise, the spinal nerves at the root of the lower limb forms lumbar plexus and sacral plexus. Now, before going ahead, let us quickly revise the course of a typical spinal nerve. In the illustration on the screen, you can see the cut section of a spinal nerve and the course of a single spinal nerve. Here you can see that these are the multiple rootlets which are called as ventral rootlets of a spinal nerve. These ventral rootlets combine together to form ventral root of the spinal nerve, which is also called as anterior root of spinal nerve. Likewise, these are the dorsal rootlets which combine together to form a single dorsal root of the spinal nerve. Now, the ventral root and the dorsal root of the spinal nerve will combine together to form a single spinal nerve. The single spinal nerve will then divide into two branches, that is the two ramus, which are, this is the ventral ramus, also called as anterior ramus, and this is the dorsal ramus, can also be called as posterior ramus. The ventral ramus of the spinal nerve will form the plexus at the root of the limbs, which will be called as brachial plexus in case of upper limb. So now, with this background, let us proceed with today's session. For descriptive purpose, different parts of brachial plexus have been defined, and the name given to the different parts of brachial plexus are comparable to the parts of a tree. As we can see in the illustration on the screen, these are the roots of a tree which combine together to form a trunk. The trunk divides to form divisions, and the divisions further divide to give rise to cords, which finally divide to give rise to branches. Likewise, students, while naming different parts of brachial plexus, we will use the term root, followed by trunk, followed by division, followed by cord, and finally branches. With respect to clavicle, different parts of brachial plexus may be grouped as supraclavicular part, retroclavicular part, and infraclavicular part. So, in the illustration on the right side of the screen, this represents the supraclavicular part, which includes roots and the trunks of brachial plexus. Likewise, this is infraclavicular part because it is located below clavicle and it includes cords and branches of brachial plexus. The part of the brachial plexus which is present behind the clavicle, this part is called as retroclavicular part and it includes division of brachial plexus. So now let us start with the roots of brachial plexus. The roots of the brachial plexus is formed by the ventral rami of 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th cervical spinal nerve along with the first thoracic spinal nerve. As you can see in the illustration on the right side of the screen, these are the roots of the brachial plexus and you can see is the schematic representation of brachial plexus. Now, what do we mean by the term prefixed and postfixed brachial plexus? Prefixed brachial plexus means sometimes 4th cervical spinal nerve also provide few fibers to the brachial plexus, and whenever this happens, the brachial plexus is called as prefixed brachial plexus. However, sometimes 2nd thoracic spinal nerve also contribute in the formation of brachial plexus. This type of brachial plexus is called as postfixed brachial plexus. Now let us try to understand the location and relations of the root of the brachial plexus. In the illustration on the screen, you can see the roots of the brachial plexus on the right side of the illustration. So these are the roots. This is the C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1 root. Now let us see the same roots on the other side of the illustration, that is on the left side. On the left side, you can see two muscles here. This is scalenus anterior muscle and this is scalenus medius muscle. So you need to appreciate that the roots of the brachial plexus along with the subclavian artery comes out by passing in between anteriorly lying scalenus anterior and posteriorly lying scalenus medius muscle. While coming out from deeper to superficial plane, the roots and the subclavian artery pulls a layer of deep fascia which is called as prevertebral layer of deep cervical fascia along with them, and this layer of fascia which forms the sheath around the brachial plexus and the subclavian artery in the axilla is called as axillary sheath. Now this illustration is to show you the surface projection of brachial plexus in the neck. In the illustration on the left side, this you can see a muscle. This is called as sternocleidomastoid. Now in the illustration, which is the schematic representation on the right side, you can see this is sternocleidomastoid. Posterior to sternocleidomastoid, there is a triangle defined in the neck which is called as posterior triangle. In the lower part of the posterior triangle, we have got brachial plexus as you can see in the illustration here. Branches from the roots of the brachial plexus. The first branch is dorsal scapular nerve which has the root value C5. The second branch is long thoracic nerve, that is nerve of Bell, which has the root value C5, C6 and C7. The root of the brachial plexus also give muscular branches to scalenus anterior, scalenus medius and scalenus posterior muscle along with few fibers to longus colli. Phrenic nerve also receives fibers from the root of the brachial plexus, phrenic nerve which has the root value C3, C4 and C5. So the C5 component come from the root of the brachial plexus. Now let us focus on the illustration present on the right side. This is C5 root of the brachial plexus. Here you can see this is dorsal scapular nerve. This dorsal scapular nerve, after branching out from the root C5 root of the brachial plexus, it pierces the scalenus medius muscle and then it descends over the dorsal side of the body wall, that is over the back in the scapular region, parallel to the medial border of scapula. The important point to note here is that this dorsal scapular nerve is accompanied by dorsal scapular artery. It innervates rhomboides minor and rhomboides major muscle along with levator scapulae. The next nerve is long thoracic nerve, which you can see here. This is long thoracic nerve. It has the root value C5, C6 and C7. This long thoracic nerve, after taking origin, it enters the posterior triangle of the neck, crosses the axillary inlet in order to enter into the axilla. In the axilla, it descends along the medial wall of the axilla parallel to the or in proximity with the mid-axillary line. The important point to note here is that long thoracic nerve during a descent, it is accompanied by or it descends parallel to thoracodorsal artery. The other branch is muscular branch to scalenus anterior, medius and posterior and longus colli muscle. Phrenic nerve also receive contribution from the C5 root of the brachial plexus. Trunks of the brachial plexus. Brachial plexus consists of three trunks: upper trunk, middle trunk, and lower trunk. Can also be called as superior trunk, middle trunk, and inferior trunk. Now let us try to understand how the formation of these three trunks of brachial plexus occur. On the right side of the illustration on the screen, you can see this is C5 root of the brachial plexus and this is C6 root of brachial plexus. C5 and the C6 roots combine together to form upper trunk, that is superior trunk of the brachial plexus. This is C7 root of the brachial plexus. It continues as middle trunk of brachial plexus. Next we have C8 and T1 roots of the brachial plexus. They unite together to form the lower trunk, that is inferior trunk of the brachial plexus. Now, on the screen is the schematic representation of the brachial plexus. Here, again, you can see this is C5 root, this is C6 root. Now, you can clearly see how C5 and the C6 roots are combining to form a trunk, which is superior or the upper trunk of the brachial plexus. This is C7 root of the brachial plexus. It continues to form middle trunk of brachial plexus. This is the C8 root and this is T1 root of brachial plexus. Both of them combine or unite together to form lower trunk, that is inferior trunk of the brachial plexus. Out of all the three trunks of the brachial plexus, superior trunk gives two branches, as you can see in the illustration on the screen. This is the first branch from the superior trunk of brachial plexus and it is called as suprascapular nerve. The suprascapular nerve, after taking origin from the superior trunk of brachial plexus, proceed posteriorly towards the dorsal side of the body wall. There it passes deep to trapezius. It passes through the suprascapular notch and innervates supraspinatus and infraspinatus muscle. It also provides articular fibers to the shoulder joint. The next branch is nerve to subclavius. This nerve to subclavius, it provides motor nerve fibers to the muscle subclavius, about which we talked in pectoral region. Suprascapular and nerves to subclavius, both the nerves has the root value C5 and C6. Occasionally, nerve to subclavius provide fibers to phrenic nerve. Phrenic nerve has the root value C3, C4 and C5. So, C5 fibers may come from nerve to subclavius, and when this occurs, the fibers coming from the nerve to subclavius are called as accessory phrenic nerve. So in the illustration on the screen, you can see this is accessory phrenic nerve and this is phrenic nerve. Now let us start with the divisions of brachial plexus. Each trunk of the brachial plexus divide to form two divisions, anterior and posterior. It is the division of the brachial plexus which pass through the axillary inlet to enter into the axilla, and hence it is the division of the brachial plexus which lies posterior to clavicle and hence forms the retroclavicular part of the brachial plexus. Now, the nerve fibers which are present in the anterior division are responsible to provide nerve supply to the anterior compartment, that is flexor compartment of the upper limb. Likewise, the nerve fibers which are present in the posterior division of the brachial plexus provide nerve supply to the posterior compartment, that is extensor compartment of the upper limb. You have a schematic representation of the brachial plexus on the screen. Now let us try to locate the divisions here. This is the anterior division formed by the superior trunk of the brachial plexus, and this is the posterior division formed by superior trunk of the brachial plexus. Now, this is the anterior division formed by middle trunk of brachial plexus, and this is the posterior division formed by middle trunk of brachial plexus. Now, this is the anterior division and this is the posterior division, both formed by the inferior trunk of brachial plexus. The division of the brachial plexus give rise to no any branch. Now let us start with the details of chords of brachial plexus. Brachial plexus consists of three chords. They are lateral chord, medial chord, and posterior chord. These chords are so named on the basis of their relation with the second part of axillary artery, which means that the lateral chord of the brachial plexus is laterally related to the second part of axillary artery. Medial chord of brachial plexus is in medial relation with the second part of axillary artery, and the posterior chord of brachial plexus comes in posterior relation to the second part of axillary artery. Out of all the three chords of brachial plexus, it is the posterior chord which is the largest. Let us now see the branches of medial chord of brachial plexus. Medial chord of brachial plexus, which has the root value C8 and T1, gives 5 branches. They are medial pectoral nerve, as you can see in the illustration, medial cutaneous nerve of arm, medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, medial root of median nerve, and after giving these 4 branches, the medial chord of brachial plexus continues as ulnar nerve. Now let us see the details of these all branches. On your screens, you can see the schematic representation of the sagittal section of pectoral region. Here, this green line represents clavipectoral fascia, and this is the pectoralis minor muscle, and this is the pectoralis major muscle. This yellow line represents the medial pectoral nerve. The medial pectoral nerve, which is the branch of medial chord of brachial plexus, it comes from deep to superficial plane by piercing the pectoralis minor muscle, where it innervates the same muscle and then reaches the pectoralis major muscle to provide its motor nerve supply. This illustration is to show you the communicating loop between medial pectoral nerve and the lateral pectoral nerve. So, this is the medial pectoral nerve and this is the lateral pectoral nerve. There is a communicating branch in between the two. This communicating branch lies in anterior relation to the first part of axillary artery. Now let us talk about medial cutaneous nerve of the arm. The medial cutaneous nerve of the arm is the smallest branch of medial chord of brachial plexus. It descends in the arm by lying in medial relation to the brachial artery and basilic vein. In the middle of the arm, this medial cutaneous nerve of the arm pierces the deep fascia and becomes superficial to supply the skin over the medial side of the distal 1/3 of the arm, as represented by the blue arrow in the illustration. The next branch is medial cutaneous nerve of forearm. This branch descends in the arm by lying in between the brachial artery and basilic vein. It pierces the deep fascia along with the basilic vein near the middle of the arm, and then it becomes superficial and supply the skin over the lower part of the arm and anteromedial side of the forearm up to the wrist, as represented by the 2 arrows here. Now let us see the other branches of the medial chord of brachial plexus. This is the medial root of the median nerve. It crosses the 3rd part of the axillary artery anteriorly in order to unite with the lateral root of the median nerve, which comes from the lateral chord of the brachial plexus. The medial root and the lateral root of the median nerve unite to form median nerve, lateral to the 3rd part of axillary artery. This median nerve then descends in the arm by lying lateral to the brachial artery. After giving all these branches, the medial chord of the brachial plexus continues as ulnar nerve. Now let us have a brainstorming session. Students, the root value of ulnar nerve is C7, C8 and T1, but medial chord has the root value C8 and T1. Now ulnar nerve, being the branch of medial chord of brachial plexus, should ideally have the root value C8 and T1 only. The question arises, from where does the fibers of C7 comes in the ulnar nerve? The answer to this is in this illustration. Here you can see that this is ulnar nerve and this is lateral root of median nerve. You can also see a communicating branch here. This communicating branch carries the fibers of C7 from lateral root of median nerve into the ulnar nerve, and hence ulnar nerve has the root value C7, C8 and T1. Lateral cord of the brachial plexus. It gives out three branches. They are lateral pectoral nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, and lateral root of median nerve. Now let us talk about these branches briefly one by one. This is again the schematic representation of the sagittal section of pectoral region. Here this green arrow represents the clavipectoral fascia, and this is pectoralis minor, pectoralis major. Now the yellow line here represents the lateral pectoral nerve. You can see that lateral pectoral nerve, it pierces the clavipectoral fascia, and on its way to pectoralis major muscle, this lateral pectoral nerve gives a branch to pectoralis minor muscle, and hence this nerve, lateral pectoral nerve, it is responsible to provide motor nerve supply to pectoralis major and pectoralis minor muscle. The next branch of the lateral cord is musculocutaneous nerve. This nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, it provides motor nerve fibers to three muscles: coracobrachialis, bicep brachii, and brachialis muscle. It also gives articular fibers to the elbow joint and nutrient artery to humerus. After giving off these all branches, it continues as lower lateral cutaneous nerve of the arm and is responsible to provide cutaneous nerve supply to the area of the skin represented by the blue arrow here. So musculocutaneous nerve, it has got motor and sensory fibers both. The next branch of the lateral cord is lateral root of the median nerve. This lateral root of the median nerve, it joins with the medial root of the median nerve lateral to the third part of axillary artery to form median nerve. Now let us talk about the branches of the posterior cord of brachial plexus. Posterior cord gives off 5 branches. They are upper subscapular nerve, thoracodorsal nerve, lower subscapular nerve, axillary nerve, and radial nerve. Let us talk about the individual branches now. This is upper subscapular nerve. This upper subscapular nerve provides motor nerve fibers to the upper part of the subscapularis muscle. Lower subscapular nerve, it provides motor nerve fibers to lower part of subscapularis muscle and teres major muscle. The third branch is thoracodorsal nerve. Thoracodorsal nerve is also called as nerve to latissimus dorsi. It provides motor nerve fibers to latissimus dorsi muscle. It descends along the posterior wall of the axilla along with the subscapular artery to supply this muscle, latissimus dorsi. When it descends over the posterior wall of axilla, it lies in anterior relation to the subscapular artery. Hence, during abduction at shoulder joint, this nerve becomes superficial or become prominent, and hence is at risk or is prone to get injured in the surgeries related to posterior wall of axilla. The next branch is axillary nerve. This axillary nerve provides motor nerve supply to deltoid and teres minor muscle. Axillary nerve wind round the posterior surface of the surgical neck of humerus along with the posterior circumflex humeral artery, and hence this nerve is at risk to get injured during intramuscular injections over the deltoid region. We will talk about the details shortly. The last branch of the posterior cord is a radial nerve. The radial nerve, it is the largest branch of the brachial plexus. It is responsible for motor nerve supply of all the extensor muscles of the arm and forearm, and it provides cutaneous nerve supply to the lateral 2.5 part of the dorsal surface of hand. The nerves forming the brachial plexus get their arterial blood supply from the branches of subclavian artery, and these branches are vertebral artery, costocervical trunk, and thyrocervical trunk. Let us start with the autonomic supply to the upper limb. The autonomic supply to the upper limb comes from T2 to T6 and according to few literature, T2 to T7 spinal cord segment. Before going ahead, let us quickly revise the concept of white and gray ramus communicants. In this illustration, you can see this is transverse section of a spinal cord. In this is the dorsal side and this is the ventral side. So this becomes the ventral root of a spinal nerve and this is the dorsal root of a spinal nerve where you can see dorsal root ganglion. The dorsal root of the spinal nerve unite with the ventral root of the spinal nerve to form a single spinal nerve. Here you can see the neurons which arises from the intermediolateral horn. They enter into the ventral root of the spinal nerve and then in the spinal nerve they separate from the other neurons in order to enter into the sympathetic chain. These fibers are the preganglionic myelinated fibers which are collectively known as white ramus communicant. These fibers may have three fates in the sympathetic chain. They may either relay in the corresponding same level of the sympathetic ganglion from where the postganglionic fibers will arise, which are the unmyelinated fibers. So these postganglionic unmyelinated fibers will re-enter into the spinal nerve and they are collectively called as gray ramus communicant. The second fate of these preganglionic myelinated fibers is that they may either ascend up or may descend down in the sympathetic chain and will then relay in the lower or higher level sympathetic ganglion from where the postganglionic fibers arises. The third fate of these preganglionic myelinated fibers is that they may come out of the sympathetic chain and may relay in the ganglion present peripherally from where the postganglionic fibers arises. With this background, let us proceed ahead. Neurons which take origin from the intermediolateral horn of the spinal cord, they carry autonomic fibers. So, this spinal cord segment from T2 to T6 and according to few literature, T2 to T7 spinal cord segment. The intermediolateral horn, the neurons which arise from the intermediolateral horn, they enter into the spinal nerve, that is T2 to T6 spinal nerve, and then through white ramus communicant, they enter into the sympathetic chain. After entering into the sympathetic chain, these myelinated preganglionic fibers will then begin to ascend upward. They ascend till the middle and the inferior cervical ganglion, which are present and are responsible for innervation of head and neck region. After relaying in the middle and inferior cervical ganglion, the postganglionic fibers from the middle cervical ganglion will enter into the fifth and the sixth cervical spinal nerve, that is C5 and C6 spinal nerve. And the postganglionic fibers from the inferior cervical ganglion will enter into C7 and C8 spinal nerve. So we can summarize for C5, C6, C7 and C8 spinal nerve that these four spinal nerve they receive autonomic fibers from T2 to T6 spinal cord segments. Then what about first thoracic spinal nerve, that is T1 spinal nerve? First thoracic spinal nerve also receives the autonomic fibers, that is gray ramus communicantis, from inferior cervical ganglion, just like C7 and C8 spinal nerve. Now we need to talk about the white ramus communicant related to T1 spinal nerve because they hold special clinical relevance. The white ramus communicant of first thoracic spinal nerve, they ascend up in the sympathetic chain and relay in superior cervical ganglion. From here, the postganglionic fibers arises and they enter into the ciliary ganglion from where without relay they pass on to the smooth muscles present in the upper eyelid, in the pupil and over the innervate the sweat gland present over the face region. So whenever interruption of these white ramus communicant of the first thoracic spinal nerve occurs, the condition which arises is called as Bernard-Horner syndrome or simply Horner syndrome. Clinical significance related to brachial plexus are Erb's Duchenne paralysis, Klumpke's paralysis, brachial plexus block, and winging of scapula. So let us start with Erb's Duchenne paralysis. Before that, let us talk about a very important anatomical point, which is Erb's point. Now, in the illustration on the right side, you can see this is the site which is called as Erb's point. Erb's point is located on the side of the neck 2 to 3 centimeters above the clavicle and in front of the transverse process of sixth cervical vertebrae. Any pressure over this point may elicit the condition called as Duchenne-Erb's paralysis, or even with electrical stimulation of this area may cause the muscles of the arm to contract. Erb's point, it is the confluence of six nerves, that is, six nerves meet here. They are C5 root of the brachial plexus, C6 root of the brachial plexus, nerve to subclavius, suprascapular nerve, anterior and posterior division of superior trunk of the brachial plexus. So, any compression over this area may result in compression of these six nerves, which may result into symptoms likewise. Now let us start with Erb's Duchenne paralysis, may simply be called as Erb's paralysis. This condition arises because of the compression or injury to upper trunk of the brachial plexus. Now we know that upper trunk of the brachial plexus has the root value C5 and C6, and hence C5 and the C6 roots are injured in this condition. Now what may be the etiopathogenesis behind this condition, Erb's paralysis? Any injury or any condition which results in hyperextension of the neck, that is, any condition which result in excessive increase in the angle between neck and the shoulder may result in tear of the nerve fibers present in the C5 and C6 roots. Now let us try to understand this by seeing the illustration. On the screen you can see the neck, the increase in the angle between the shoulder and the neck has occurred. As a result, the upper trunk of the brachial plexus comes at the risk and the nerve fibers may get stretched or even teared. Now, when can this occur? This may occur during childbirth while performing the lateral flexion of the neck. Excessive lateral flexion may result in Erb's paralysis, or it may occur during fall from the height, as fall from the motorcycle or fall during horse riding, which are commonly seen condition. As a result, you can see the excessive increase in the angle between the shoulder and neck is occurring. This may also result because of the heavy backpacks. Again, the same compression of the upper trunk occurs in these all conditions. Now, whenever hyperextension of the neck occurs, that is, increase in the angle between neck and the shoulder occurs. Now we need to remember which all are the nerves which are affected. The nerves which are affected in this condition, Erb's Duchenne paralysis, are musculocutaneous nerve, axillary nerve, nerve to subclavius, and suprascapular nerve. And the muscles which get paralyzed are bicep brachii, brachialis, coracobrachialis. These three muscles are paralyzed because they are innervated by musculocutaneous nerve. Now, the muscles which are innervated by axillary nerve which get paralyzed in this condition, Erb's Duchenne paralysis, are deltoid and teres minor. Now, nerve to subclavius, it innervates subclavius muscle which get paralyzed. Suprascapular nerve innervates supraspinatus and infraspinatus. So total 8 muscles get paralyzed and 4 nerves are affected in the condition called as Erb's Duchenne paralysis. Now we need to understand what are the clinical features with which patient presents. Because of the paralysis of the muscles, the patient is unable to perform abduction at shoulder joint. As a result, his upper limb remains by the side of the body in adducted position. He is unable to perform lateral rotation of the arm, that is lateral rotation at shoulder joint, and hence the upper limb is in medially rotated position. He is unable to perform supination of the forearm, and hence upper limb is in prone position. And he is unable to perform flexion at elbow joint. As a result, the elbow joint remain extended, and this characteristic position is called as waiter's tip deformity or policeman tip deformity. Apart from the motor loss, patient also complain of sensory loss over the area involving the area supplied by the axillary nerve and the musculocutaneous nerve, which are over the upper part of the lateral surface of the arm and over the lateral surface of the forearm. The next clinical condition related to brachial plexus is Klumpke's paralysis. This is the condition which arises because of the injury to lower trunk of the brachial plexus. We know that lower trunk of the brachial plexus has the root value C8 and T1. Students, C8 and T1 spinal nerve are responsible for innervation of the muscles and the skin over the hand, and hence all the clinical features which you will see in Klumpke's paralysis will be related to deformity or the sensory loss over the hand. Now let us see the details of Klumpke's paralysis. Klumpke's paralysis occurs whenever the condition resulting in hyperabduction at the shoulder joint occurs. As a result, stretching of the lower trunk of the brachial plexus and even tearing of the nerve fibers present in the lower plexus may occur. Now let us see when this can occur. Imagine a condition in which person falling from the height catch hold of something which comes on the way in order to protect himself from falling. In this condition, hyperabduction at the shoulder joint may occur, which may result in tearing of the nerve fibers present in the lower trunk of the brachial plexus. And we know that lower trunk of brachial plexus has the root value C8 and T1. Now, the illustration on the right side of the screen shows the other condition in which lower trunk of the brachial plexus may be affected is during childbirth. As you can see, the doctor is trying to bring out the child by pulling the hand. As a result, in this condition also hyperabduction may occur and injury to the lower trunk of the brachial plexus may occur, as you can see here. Now let us try to understand what all are the signs and the symptoms with which patient will present to us. In this condition, because of the injury to C8 and T1 spinal nerve, the short muscles of the hand will get paralyzed. As a result, the patient will present with the clinical condition called as ulnar claw hand. In this, the extension at metacarpophalangeal joint and flexion at middle and distal interphalangeal joint will occur in case of digits 4th and the 5th digit. Patient will also present with Horner syndrome. Sensory loss over the medial 2.5 and according to few literature, medial 1.5 part of the hand and medial side of the forearm and arm will be there. Horner syndrome. Horner syndrome is the condition in which triad of ptosis, meiosis and anhidrosis occurs along with loss of ciliospinal reflex and enophthalmos. Next condition is winging of scapula. As we have already talked about winging of scapula in previous 2 sessions, so we will quickly see the condition. Winging of scapula occurs because of the injury to long thoracic nerve, which has the root value C5, C6 and C7. This nerve is also called as nerve of Bell. Long thoracic nerve provide motor nerve supply to serratus anterior muscle. So this muscle will get paralyzed. Serratus anterior is responsible for protraction of scapula and it also helps in overhead abduction, and hence patient with paralysis of serratus anterior will have difficulty in protraction of scapula, that is performing pushing and punching movement, and he will have disability in performing overhead abduction. Whenever he tries to does pushing and punching movement, at that time medial border becomes prominent and hence the condition is called as winging of scapula. Brachial plexus block. This technique involves injection of the anesthetic drug in the axillary sheath in order to desensitize the nerves which form the brachial plexus. It can be done by three approaches: interscalene approach, supraclavicular and axillary route. As you can see in the illustration here, this represents the interscalene approach, this being the supraclavicular and this being the axillary route approach. We know that roots of the brachial plexus, they come out from deep to superficial plane by passing in between scalene anterior and scalene medius muscle, and while doing so they pull a layer of deep fascia along with them, which is the extension of prevertebral layer of deep cervical fascia, which later on in the axilla will be called as axillary sheath. So this concept is utilized to give the anesthetic drug through interscalene approach. In this condition, as you can see in the illustration here, the patient is asked to sniff because scalene anterior and medius are the accessory muscle of respiration. During the sniffing maneuver, the patient makes the two muscles prominent in order to make the groove between them prominent, which is then utilized to inject the anesthetic drug around the nerves forming the brachial plexus. Supraclavicular approach. This is based on the principle that the trunk of the root and the trunk of the brachial plexus are present in the posterior triangle. Here, the site of injection, as you can see in the illustration here, the site of injection of anesthetic drug is approximately 2 centimeter above the mid-clavicular point. The needle is inserted backward, inward, and downward in order to anesthetize the nerves forming the brachial plexus. The last approach is the axillary approach, where the anesthetic drug is injected inside the axillary sheath in the proximity to the axillary artery. So with this, we end up this session. Thank you.